and Gasan King to Garus Sungora Senedelia, Garumote and Gorelana, Tangazugi, Samnoria, Chidigi, Chidizam Giane, Digi to Yada Dunga say, Dondalia, Deraja, Jeje, and Devati, Chidizam Dewa Dunyarda, and Dunga Sediga Samnoti, and Dikunodi, that did the Noturu Chagores. Di kuno di tonen se di jawa janya tu an di se di ge rang tingin tu ya dang di gi tu dunga se ya an ji shan ya che we samba an ji ko ha ta ya ge samba mongoli go di su cha sa no tu res da na kar che go re lam na dang an ji ge an ji ge jawa chima la da mi ko ba to ya da an tar ba da tham ji kin bi ge to ya ge 네 된다래야 녀모바 차사 뻥비기 타르바세 토야게 꿀노데니 시켜고래 꿀노디 키에제 아니 꿀노디 키에제는 디된다래야 추림소야다 안진바다야 안잠바다 제와 인지 고미야 어두스네 안자주 셈 고미야데 냠는 두스제고래 세제 맞아 안두스네 되냐 그신데 쉬야데 데르와다
Good morning. What we've been looking at is an exhortation from the Gendün Gyatso for us to look at our minds and to come to recognize within ourselves the degree to which our mind and therefore our physical and verbal activities are focused solely on this life's events and activities. The fault of having our mind solely focused on this life's events is that this is a particularly narrow perspective, looking not beyond this life and seldom even beyond our immediate future. And such a narrow perspective makes it much more likely that we'll engage in non-virtue and do so frequently. And moreover, the virtue we do accumulate will be weak in strength. So rather what we need to do, is having recognized this, what we need to do is cultivate a far-sighted outlook, looking beyond this life, looking at the need to accumulate causes to have a good rebirth, and to attain liberation and enlightenment itself. And thereby, with such a motivation, engage in the accumulation of those causes through ethics, generosity, patience, and so forth.
나디니게 안에 기회 취에 냠는 제디에네 나지게 다다나 채고레스마도 몽바나 로카시 질 지긴 세데 파장바 있나 나 경어라 그래스 제상한주 가르선 한주 류리야 안에 템포다 따와 템포가에 말해스 제상 귀엔 단 파시 직초죠 그 디싱해봐 매딩에 차도 그래 인디자 저기 제디 냠는 제디 고 다된 람사 제고 고레스지 숨거로와
Building on this, and the next key point is we must not delay. When we come to accept the need for a wider perspective, we must not delay in acting under the influence of this way of thinking, because our situation is not stable. Our life will end, our circumstances will change. When we look at this, we recognize that it will not be long before everyone, everything, and I will all be gone. Therefore, we must apply ourselves now to transform our mind.
그래서 내내 인자당 저기 계획 자와 같이 줍투비네 다 먼저 시도도 디케도요. 그래서 계획 자와 디케 안디기 대부 아모반에 디기다 안디기 주비에게 대부 줍투고래 마도 샹아 저기 세델이야 벤조다 소수기 니니도다 안 소수기 류다 가르네 시도도 갑라바 안 샤샤줘야 마도 안 케도야 가요 말레스 다 케도야 된 저기 디바 제반에 디바디 케도고래 개와체네 개와디 케도고래 제가 디바 제반에 디바 케도도 마오반에 대부 둥아뇽 그래서 제가 개와 제반에 개와디게 대부디 마오반에 대부 디기 용고래 제가 디네 예산다가 디기 두고야 돼 김새로 디리에 제가다 세델이야 안저 삼로톤에 기회 자와다 ben에 되니게 추림 소야다 진발라 쇠바다 준주 가서 냠는 잠재기 냠는 제마도 바이나 삼로 되니 눈로다지 류디 개발마도 된 삼로 눈로다지 바 차르고 그래서지 dundoe ne sosugi chige sayadno ya da chetige kanga seyaru tablamde kono sogi samla tangore chesa nganju midige dundo tisam maza samla ma thu baina dundo da chigwa chagires chesa da dundo le la ba nganju ge chutum soya da an jamba da jawa komya in gejo tige chuptu ba che gore esaje da di yanche nganju ndo sin da na nyingbo dige di son sharwa sonro da.
When this life ends, all our worldly possessions that we've valued so and put such energy into accumulating, as well as the relationships we fostered with loved ones and friends, none of these will be able to accompany us into our next life, nor all the worldly knowledge that we have accumulated. None of this can accompany us. What does though, what solely does though, is the imprints that we have accumulated. And these imprints are through this transformation of our thought process, of developing a mind that is not overcome by distraction to mundane pleasures and problems, by developing a far-sighted outlook. We can develop very powerful, virtuous imprints in what remains of this life. Imprints from engaging in acts of generosity, or developing the mind wishing to give, the mind of ethical restraint, patience, love and compassion, and so forth. Developing these minds are creating imprints on our continuum that will bring us not only happiness in this life, but these imprints, as they ripen in future lives, are the causes that lead us to continue our spiritual development, progressing towards the attainment of lasting inner peace, lasting stable happiness. Without transforming our mind in this way, and thereby accumulating imprints of great value, we can continue to live a life really not so different from an animal. On the surface, of course, there are differences, but the minds are quite similar in that they are focused on overcoming mundane problems and attaining mundane pleasures. That, if that is the sole focus of one's attention, it's not particularly different from an animal. And there the great lot is. With this rebirth we've attained, we have incredible human potential. This intelligence that we have enables us to radically transform our mind. And this will be lost otherwise. So therefore this great need to develop an outlook, an expansive mind with great inner strength, focused on cultivating the causes for lasting happiness.
Draw pemba maybe Xin Di, Yiden do Miru, Luang, Sudi Chir, City Lutonla, Chesa Michigan Jubatsals.
The 15th verse. Friends and loved ones who are not wholesome companions are ultimately deceptive and are unworthy of trust. Because of these reasons, preoccupation with this life must be renounced. Please, by every possible means, accomplish the profound Dharma.
Then draw pemba may be Xin Di sitting on Zulia, that you get draw said, draw said that they draw it, give you draw than TV draw, Nyungurwa, Tizada, Kashigeta, draw what is and the other Kumaya draw said that Jishan Nobaki had said Jishik or Nij or Shanley, Java Jegi, and the Jigger Soso same dine which is also same dine which didn't teach and the teacher was a Shanley, Siri, Jamba, Shanley, Nubik, Java Jegi, the Nigi Chigenji, draw in the and draw the Anzulia. Cedilia do Cede down Momban, Duayaki, Gusagura Mado, digging on the Cede down Momban, digging on the Tarbada, Tamji Kimbe Toyagi, Gutisatu, Sago Marchesa Dineza, Pempa Mes, Pingo Mares, and the Chesnadi Duaya Gusago, Sayagi, Tigores, Chesnadi, Nanzulia, Tarbada, Tamji Kembata, and the Givi Java, Tubiagi, Drochigo Mares, Chesadi. 新印子的新印哪些的新印是的让我这个去看就露出去的呢印哪些嘛说呢我就地方的米给为来了呀准备就被新印东西吃过的是
friends and loved ones who are not wholesome companions. So we divide those that we have connection with or relationship with. We can divide those into virtuous friends and non-virtuous friends. So there are those who encourage us in non-virtue. So this can be through our relationship with them. Our activities or our conversation is in the direction or on the side of non-virtue. These are unwholesome friends because whilst they are certainly our friends, we have a relationship, a friendly outlook towards them, the result of this relationship is that we accumulate non-virtue under their influence. And probably we influence them in a similar way. Here, with this so-called friend, we are accumulating the causes for further suffering. And we are not accumulating the causes for lasting happiness. So these are unwholesome friends. Wholesome friends, or literally virtuous friends, it's the same word for a spiritual teacher. But here in the broader meaning, virtuous friends are friends who encourage us in virtue. So it's still people we have a close connection with, but the relationship is wholesome. And when we are in their company, we are encouraged to continue to engage in the accumulation of virtue. And these friends, our virtuous friends, are wholesome friends.
and Tarbata Tamjiki Boko, Lana Miko, Gusagio, Marjazadi, Ide Yomar, Luar Nebares, did a Carso de Table Matuba Yonsi, Yunguris, or that Tarbata Tamjiki Boko, Gusagio Mare, Saji, Chagi. The Delia, Lodi Yishe, Lo Chasan, Delia, Le Jene, Duenetigo Mares or Yite Mirung City.
In the second line, we see that such friends, unwholesome companions, are ultimately deceptive and are unworthy of trust. From the context of the text, we understand that what is meant by unwholesome companions, we should approach in a broader way. It includes those who don't necessarily urge us in non-virtue, for example, that we talk together with in a non-virtuous manner, but being people who are focused solely on the attainment of happiness in this life and focused on talking about all the problems and difficulties solely of this life with no perspective broader than that, we end up strengthening our habituation to our focus on mere mundane pleasures and keeping our view, our outlook limited. Such relationships also restrict us. And we can see, therefore, that through such relationships, we lose the opportunity to cultivate the causes that will lead to lasting happiness, the happiness that we truly desire. And in that way, we come to understand that such companions are ultimately deceptive and are unworthy of trust. In that it's not that they are untrustworthy or trying to deceive us, but we think that this relationship is a relationship that brings happiness. But the happiness that follows is worldly. It's mundane in that it's transitory, it will be experienced and exhausted in this life. This relationship doesn't lead to the accumulation of causes that lead to lasting happiness the attainment of liberation and enlightenment. And in that way, we are deceived by the relationship, not necessarily by the companion, but we're deceived by the relationship in that we believe this relationship will lead to a happiness that it cannot provide.
dunga modo dewa yungu yungu 말해. 제사다 미기 외전 지진의 약고 여러서 마도 경랑 강한 책이 디 제거를 라이 말와. 제사 되니게 숨고를 라고 되네 될에 이대요 말해. 근데 대화 용백이 해 봐. dunga yun구래서. 근데 지금 안디나지 안은 아주 세디자장기 디기주에다 동아세 돈달라 자 삼 디자장 땅제 되바이나 레갈레 되바이나 디기 안은 아주 그냥 안 디자와 제바데 세딜 되게 그냥 용투그래서 대야 이대요 말았어. 용투비 내봐요 말았어. 김선 되네 인자 안은 다 가르쳐 버렸으네. 되니기 딕발로 땅고래서 뢰땅고래서 뢰통세다 미기베 또 저다 미기베 기베 신인디 파 직되는 파 디초서 마저와제 바로 파샤 안디마세 체디 야장기 튕겨주베 동아세 디장야 살마다와제 디야 파샤 자 체딜리안 튕겨다 디기 두에 튕겨주도 주고 내가 제들리 제고르데 디장야 살마다와제 디장야 살마다에 파샤 고래서 자네 가르쳐 버렸으네다 조언 중에 채치말이야 하다 미고 뭐 토야 땡텔이야 안 주님의 제고 그래게 된다래야 아니 배수지야다 릉아 있으면 예저 된 배출임소야 한 잠바다 제와 거면 아니 지금 저기 세바코미야라서 봐도 전제 좀야 되네 띵예진 신의 주야라서 봐 되는 다음에 또 동반이 또 배시라고 막 계속이 기회 취해서 지슬레 배수 제고리 해서지 그다음에 취직이 안 주버 찾아서 뒤선 거래.
The verse concludes, because of these reasons, preoccupation with this life must be renounced. Please, by every possible means, accomplish the profound Dharma. Here we are encouraged to look at our relationships and see the potential danger that comes from our relationships with people who are focused solely on this life. The inspiration that may well have arisen to look beyond this life, to transform our outlook, this is difficult to develop and sustain if we are relying on those who do not share this outlook, because they will not support us in our development. In fact, they may actively discourage us, think what we're doing is a waste of time. So we need to recognize that unwholesome companions includes both those who encourage us in non-virtue, either in behavior or speech, or who in whose company we end up wasting the opportunity to accumulate virtue. What we need to do, as the verse says, abandon, or we need to renounce preoccupation with this life. This means lifting our view. And to enable us to do so, whilst we will continue to interact with all types of people, those that we should rely on are those who are supportive for our determination to transform our mind, to broaden our outlook, and to have a mind focused on liberation and enlightenment. And the way to transform our mind is by, in the fourth line, by every possible means, accomplish the profound Dharma. And this then refers to the meditations that have been outlined, both the preliminary meditations, so as to give rise to this strength of mind, a determined, focused, resolute mind, which were those on the precious human rebirth, death and impermanence, and so forth. And then to accumulate the transformative causes that will lead to liberation and enlightenment, namely meditating on love and compassion, generosity, ethical restraint, patience, choice, perseverance, concentration, and the wisdom realizing emptiness. These are the profound, the causes of the profound Dharma that will lead to the attainment of the goal. The other causes, death and impermanence, precious human rebirth, and so forth, lead to the development of the mind that will be focused, that will have the sufficient strength to accumulate those causes. The 16th verse. This banquet of sense pleasures, wealth and possessions are servants of Yama, enemies leading your mind astray. Your body in the full bloom of youth is like a delightful garden, similar to a rainbow appearing in the sky.
Lingatanga Toyada, the Niki Kibuche, Rikiminade, the Niki, Dusche, and some Lodipa, the Niki Nor Sansin, Kanyang, Cha, and Sosugi, that Lingataya, the Katunche, Jowota, Nien said the Duch and the Katunche, the Nikanyang charge, and the Niki charge and Duchene, Nanzuki Chawal, Tuya Machuvaina, and Dikarjosen, Shinji Kibu Luti, sitting on Kiwachima, Jike. Digi Duviata, Tarba, Tamjiki, Gusago, Masavan, and Gawa Droyades, and Jugi, and the Castle Nasonda, and the Chick, Koala Keg, and Yalla, Koala Keg, Gucharo, as needy.
Looking at the first two lines, this banquet of sense pleasures, wealth, and possessions are servants of Yama, enemies leading your mind astray. The first line is very broad. Wealth and a variety of possessions is quite clear. Sense pleasures refers to all that we perceive through sight, smell, taste, touch, and enjoy. So this is very broad. We include, for example, going to pleasing environments, beautiful places. So this refers then, in this first line, everything that we rely on for mundane happiness. And the fault, as we've been hearing, is not the experience of mundane happiness, but it's our striving for it, in particular the mental occupation to achieve it, as well as feelings relating to its loss, and so forth. And accompanying this, when we experience these pleasures, the fault that is made is seeing this as the best that we can attain, and being satisfied with that. This very limited view, now in the second line, are servants of Yama, enemies leading your mind astray. So this Yama again refers to our variety of afflictions that lead us astray from virtue. So here it's specific to being caught up in the mundane pleasures of this life, or the striving for them and the enjoyment of them. That view, that outlook, is the enemy that leads our mind astray from virtue.
Then Lu Langso Gibe Gazeti, Gunkala Shevi, Chasundra, Sitangan, Lu, Tetan, Yobata, and the Chasangan, Subuti, Imene, and Nimale, Namka Gungs, and Namkal, Namgalia, and Pachasan Shario, and Dida Chibares. That's the Digale, and Lu Longe to get Shagor, and the Longe, the Lu Longe, Yin Yedo, and the Karina Chasa. Namke Jason Nanches, Gasson got near up Genji that head, Namke Jason near up Genji that head, shared the mother, Lamsa, Koshicho Roas, Dinashi, Tapa Tembuyo, Mara, Lu Longe, and I to get in that Lu Longe, Tapa Tembu shoes into Goroa, just I did Tapa Tembuyo Mares, just I didn't Namgala Shever, Jason Naji, Nimichi Jiru, Lamsa, King and Batch that chest on Lamsa Jiru, the Benjo Chamber Chub and the Pesh, which you have in a Kin Chunju and Jimmy Meva Chadra, and another Subuti, the Tana, Yawashi, which in the Kin Chunju and the Jigger Subuki Chada, Subu Meva Chadra, the Nigin Yungoro, then is a Jason Najiri. 저 수부 대부 여외에 내나서 충충지기 인기 제네고 수부 철라 저제는 시줘야 되는 용거로 하지 제가 자수 나시래서.
The verse concludes with, your body in the full bloom of youth is like a delightful garden, similar to a rainbow appearing in a clear sky. We know that when we see a rainbow in a clear sky, it's beautiful, but it's quickly gone. It's transitory. So too is the pleasure we take in perceiving that pleasure of the senses. That pleasure of seeing a beautiful rainbow in a clear sky, that too doesn't last. Nor does the strength and vigor of a young body. And in fact, the body of this life, this too does not last. All the pleasures that arise through our senses, enjoyable sights, things that we listen to and enjoy, taste, smell and touch, are quickly gone. So too our wealth and our possessions. This we need to remind ourselves of again and again. Because not only do they change momentarily, there are a constant stream of causes encouraging a rapid decline. We know our own financial situation can rapidly change. Through a loss of a job, a bad investment, our financial situation can rapidly change. We also know for our own health too. Through meeting a small cause of a virus or bacteria, or having an accident, our situation can rapidly change. And this is the meaning of an analogy, likening our good health, our body, our life in its entirety, as well as sense pleasures, wealth and possessions, to being like a rainbow appearing in a clear sky. The 17th verse, your cherished home, treasured possessions and dear family are extraordinary transient and are like an illusory horse or elephant. Because of these reasons, preoccupation with this life must be renounced. Please, by every possible means, accomplish the profound Dharma.
And yu shi se de so su gi da dina zhong ke na liu be kang ba dang sa je da da so su gi ben ji gu no de su ji je de su cha sa ane gyu me gi mi da ba re ge ji gyu de da ba tem bu ska ya ma re si zan gyu me gi da lang ba na shi re sa ji na de ne zang nga zo sam ga sa ne be da ba tem bu ge di na ji gyu gi ni me ne de ge san be sam lo chyo ro wa di sam da ha de ji go ma re si za de da ba tem bu yo ma re mi da ba re ge ji gyu ro go re si za da di ga sa ne gyu me ge da la na shi re sa ji.
Your cherished home, treasured possessions and dear family. These are all impermanent phenomena. They change momentarily. But we do not relate to them in this way. We relate to them as if they will last. And when we suddenly are aware that they do not, we have a reaction, almost a surprise. We need to reflect on this to come to recognize that our cherished home, cherished possessions and dear family are being impermanent. They are not stable. And therefore they are not reliable because they are changing. And this is not relating to them in this way leads to unhappiness and disappointment.
술리 칠세의 김천 대인장 시월다 김천 대인장 아니 세디를 통라 아니 최선모 지경 주바사시도 지자 대내게 삼다베는 대신 안쪽에다 디 강게 직접 숨겨도 나 집어 채워 갈 숨어 미다바시고 따바때 보여 말해서 신고로 지자 안쪽에 균노 안에 강바당 안에 본연생 가봐 연나 차사 나저 삼나나라 딱바 템부 유네 지에 메딩 삼단 거라체 디다다 말에 제자 디상 깨지기지 교어 두고 이템바 이템 미루와레 제자 유미기 나지레 자선 나지레 줌센 디인상 제솔야 시엔징 차백에 빼딱바 템부 시엔체를 로드 파르여셰 안에 최 체델야 안에 지기 최사 뭐 냠네 최디 냠네 제고레 에서지
need to reflect on how these are extraordinarily transient and are likened to an illusory horse or elephant, and we can relate to this in a similar way to the rainbow in the previous verse, seeing that something that appears to the mind as having some essence and therefore a quality of lasting, this is actually not the case in reality. And therefore, into the third line, because of these reasons, preoccupation with this life must be renounced. Because the way we relate to what we are preoccupied by is exaggerating their value. For example, seeing them as being lasting, stable and reliable in relation to our objects of our sense pleasures, wealth, possessions, our home, and those we have good relationships with. But this is not in accordance with reality. They are like an illusion, like a rainbow. They are transitory and will pass, and therefore are not stable or reliable. Then into the fourth line, please by every possible means accomplish the profound Dharma. This is the same as then, so these three verses have the same meaning. So focus on impermanence, so as to shake us up from this grasping at things existing permanently when they do not. And rather, through developing this broader perspective, focused on developing the minds of the Dharma.
지다다 최사모 지견치 or 최사모 냠네 치고레 시대다 최사모 냠네 제다 가사 그니디 어저 직슈 바로와다 가스네 semje 탐제 대화다 되나 대가당보라 아주 랑신 참아 안에 둥아 미디어 바다 대화 찍바레 제사다 말도 semje 차사 둥아를 코 둥아 용 되고도 대화 민도 제사다 코르 둥아 될 타르제 대화 톡우도 sem비게 되녀기 가서 타바 코르 둥아를 타르되게 삼고 군로디게 되네 대인자다 semje 탐제 대화다 되나 sem비게 잠바디 고곰 되네 야 semje 탐제 둥아라 다나 sem비게 아니 니제곰 되네 semje 탐제 대화다 댐바다 둥아다 대화다 녜지기 지다다 semje 탐제 코르 둥아를 대제야 상계서는 이 꾸기 sem비게 학삼 되네게 삼다 니제랴 나 semje 탐제게 된동이 상요고바 마톱된 탑면의 semje이 된 제발라 상요고바의 초도 유발에시 지다 상요고바 톱고도 제 상요고바 톱으로 sem비게 당한주의 자시 셈삼다디 냠내제 디제 안디네 안데 당에 상요고바 톱발라 당아랑게 내가 가르쳐 오서는 릉의 이순고네 예주도며 자오인 지금의 sem비 수름 송야다 되네 랑게 류롱제 게자 차산 시한리아로 당기 sem비게 되네게 로 도스전의 자야체 얘네 안식 쇠바 강아 유생규 녀바다 강아다 가르셔베나 델리아 안셈 마투바체 셈 바페보지 되토바 지긴 세베 쇠바 거미야 안디는 얌nen디야 야네 야도 그 가심 구유면에 되네게 계획 자와를 증기 세베 전주 소미야디게 당아서 가상 기니디 디고르데 되는 지고르세데 최사만 얌내지다디 안디소르 디슈사레
In this collection of verses, twice it says, please by every possible means accomplish the profound Dharma. In particular, yesterday afternoon session, the one preceding this, I discussed what is meant by profound Dharma, so just to recap very briefly on that. The meditation, so this is the meditation that comes on having built the foundation of having developed a broader perspective, through having reflected on the preciousness of this life and its impermanence. Here we recognize the equality between us and all beings, recognizing that my deep innermost yearning is to live a meaningful life, attaining and experiencing peace of mind, a mind undisturbed by any form of of pain or suffering. And this wish is not unique to me. It's shared by everyone I've ever met across the expanse of lifetimes. All beings without exception yearn for lasting, stable happiness. But we all suffer, despite wanting happiness, despite everything we think, say and do, being motivated to achieve happiness and overcome problems, we continue to suffer. And even looking at the coarsest level of our life, we see how unwanted circumstances befall us continuously, one after the other. And this is because ourselves and all beings suffer for the same reasons, our afflictions. So here we need to, having recognized this equality between us, we then move into reflecting on the sufferings of samsara, where there are two parts, reflecting on the realms, or wherever one is born, suffering is experienced. Beings everywhere cannot experience peace as long as they are bound in samsara, bound by contaminated karma and afflictions, and that then takes us into reflecting on the causes of our suffering, in particular, our afflictions. This then leads to the generation of the mind of definite emergence, the determination to definitely emerge from the suffering realms of samsara and attain the state of liberation, where the mind is liberated from samsara. And then we apply this. Of course, in the start of this meditation, we looked at the equality between self and others. Having done so, it's now very easy in the meditation to apply this determination to gain a liberation from samsara to others. Whether they recognize this or not, this is what they yearn for. But recognizing that they are trapped in a pitiful situation of, despite desiring happiness, continuing to create the causes for suffering. We generate compassion. We generate love, longing for them to be freed of this and experiencing lasting happiness. We then develop this further, developing the altruistic attitude of universal responsibility, where we see the welfare of others, their attainment of lasting happiness, as our individual responsibility. It's not the problem of someone else to help them. It's my individual responsibility. Thereafter we develop bodhicitta, which is the determination that in order to fulfill this mere wish, to be of real help to others, I have to become a Buddha, the most skilled of guides. And therefore, everything I do from now will be motivated to create the causes to become a Buddha for the sake of others. And that then leads us into the meditation on the 6 perfections, of which we've looked at 4. Because these are how we create the causes whilst conjoined with this mind of bodhicitta that will lead to enlightenment. Particularly the foundation of ethics, a mind that is restrained from coming under the influence of afflictions, the mind of generosity, the wish to give, the wish to help. We looked at patience, the mind that is undisturbed in the face of adversity, whether it comes from without or within, and then joyous perseverance, the 4th of the 6, the mind that takes delight in virtue. The 18th verse. Grasping at the self as dear, a looped rope that has since beginningless time continuously bound you night and day, from now and from your heart, exchanging yourself with others, I implore you to generate the sacred mind of enlightenment.
Rang jeba zimbe jisin chiyores, jiba ngarang yakbo kukudu, ngarang digi kukudu, sembe rang jeba zimbe samlo shukchimbo shiuchi kores. Digi anaka rang chebarchine shen yawa tunda rang chebarchine rang che rangi digi koya tunda la rang chebarchine shen ya anaka te dang shen le chewa che ya da shen le nyoba che ya de chi yong ores chisa de shen le nyoba che ya da shen le chewa che chisa rang chebarchine bi chizing gi tone yong ores chisa rang chizing digi ta tapal ma so na ngzu ji pa da shen ge ding da dire tapal ma rang chizing dire es chisa da digi Nyemane dadi badu gyuma chebaje rangchezi ngansu samlana yoyo baje digi pa damjene anu korwege dunga dila tarje tarbada tarba salya droma chugade dire ese warda rangcheba tsimbige shabadi ngar gyunche mebra dadu chingse.
The verse starts by answering the question, why since beginningless time across this expanse of lifetimes have we not yet attained enlightenment? And the answer is in the first two lines. Grasping at the self as dear, a looped rope that has since beginningless time continuously bound you night and day. Grasping at the self as dear is a more literal way to translate what is normally called the self-cherishing mind. This is a subtle mind, a mind that we're not always aware of, that grasps at ourselves as being dear, first and foremost, wanting our own happiness. And this is like a looped rope, or more commonly we can think of a lasso or a noose. You can use either in your own analogies. So the grasping at the self as dear is a mind that, like a noose or like a lasso, has kept us bound continuously since beginningless time. And therefore, with our own self-interest first and foremost, we have continued to make the causes for suffering rather than for lasting happiness.
Ezada rangji zingi samnodiki duesha ine detsu dele ligore konro ina ngajia ine shenle cewi jewa chebasa rangji zin dele ligore jerwada. Dine ezada nganazuki dusine kanisligu dusine nganazuki shimjura chebada raba rubi nganazu haku tugure.
The grasping, or if you think of all the afflictions that you have identified within yourself, they all come from grasping at oneself as dear. Attachment, wanting things to go our way. Anger, wanting to things not to be harmed, myself not to be harmed. Any wish to harm others, all comes from grasping at oneself as dear. This we can come to understand on a coarse level.
Zada rang jebaz menga rang digi dang rang yaku chu yong chi sembige samna tie du ane nga zugi di danda la ya ta di bene nga khala yaku sa ko tu se nga se tang bo nga se rang jebaz nga la yaku ku du nga yaku cha ku tu sembige ji ke samna ta che nga se ba rang ji sin di rwa ji dan di le de ne ane ga yong lo se ne di da yue je ru ju ye ge danda la ya ane ji ke semje ane so xue xie sa ya la so pa da and membigida nga be yagu kugudu nga le yagu chaala tungi yagu kugudu samje dene di chane jigi benjola jianle chakbegi benjola chakbegi chakbada de di wangen xian gu hua da da gumo gu ya da nan ji jeje ya da da jing nga le ya na ba nga sa rang je nga le nu gu se rang je sam da je nga le ya konzu nu sa konzu nu gu samje den pa kap de je la so kong la de ya ne 지금 저거야 대리야 너버기야 초보에 증해라 소바도요 차사 데네신의 이거로 진짜 랑지 대성한 저기 세부 하고 당번 가서 오코 갈래 뇌소스 갈래 두지알아서 랍제 남산 파 두지라야 딜이거로 당저 진짜 데네인자 지게 두신데 제상한 저 되샤다 호랑아 예세 나 예세다 나서 당번 가서 나 윤대시 나 야구인甚至 데네 콜레팅 하야 콩알에 껴아래 선비 통증 다야다 디제 제자 두신 랑아치진디기 되샤게야 콩로게야 나게야 데니기 뇨모 티에디 니 뇨모 바디게 차사 미게 와래다 동아녀야 규려 코알레게 만솔레게 규리스 제자다 제자 데네 인자디 랑아치진디기 되샤게 콩로게 나게게 디겐진 대야네야도 코알레 레anga 바사제 코알레 마타로 들어와 되어버렸어 제자다 저데 랑치진 세디리에서 어디리에서
to see the role that grasping at oneself as dear plays in our lives. It arises from it is what arises. The vast majority, perhaps all of our thoughts, our wish for happiness, as well as our wish to be freed from problems. These very fundamental desires that all beings share come from the wish for my happiness, my wish to be free from problems. So it's putting oneself first and foremost. It's in the mundane things of our life, wanting to enjoy a nice meal. But it's at every level that we have this wish of ourselves first. So from this, all our afflictions arise. Wanting our own happiness first, wanting to overcome our problems first and foremost, we therefore justify harmful activities. We will knowingly deceive others, knowingly take advantage of others, and even if we know in a particular circumstance we really shouldn't, we will justify it. Because the underlying motivation is I want, or I don't want. Placing ourselves first and foremost. All the conflict we experience in our life and what we observe in society comes from the wish for my happiness. And therefore, when a situation or another person or a group are perceived as impeding my happiness, harmful intent, anger, and so forth arise, because they are impeding my happiness. All our afflictions arise from grasping at the self as dear. Attachment, anger, pride, all of them. These are being afflictions, non-virtuous, and thereby create the causes for suffering. And when they ripen in propelling karma, they lead to rebirth in the lower realms.
Geshe capta digumeno kyoran nam yut da digumeno hanga nga jigi rang chizin yo ba za gag marwa maga de ne maga we samlo shki gor maga samlo ko shanlia ani che ta hang de yakumino sembe samlo ki di no do cha gor che rang chizin digi chizin nga joge rang che ba zime samlo 저거 가보 예배 신나라 파모 분야이나다 소소 사다 저거 있나다 소소게 랑제선 나랑이 인세베 삼로 제선 숙침부 줘봐나 소소게 되바도 마도 파셔되게 케멜레나 남산들이 혼란기로 와 뭐네 전에 미소소랑 되버려래 아니 디로와 제사디 인지미지 에이디 케멜레네 아니 야고 말해서 혼란거 요 말와 이내 나스 나래 랑기 제선게 삼는데 나랑게 되바들 랍 안디 네 되바만 네 되바디 그 켈리마상 에디 야고 메바 그 나래 야고 메바다기도 선배 삼다지는 아주기 완전 혼란하야다 안지 도스네 강아티거와 디네자 랑제선 삼도데 아주기 Gyun tamje nga zu kanga chesa de zo da rang chin de li ho re che za da nga zu ge ko wa le ya thar ma tu ba che tam gan di rang chin re an ma nga son ma thi ju gan di rang chin gi di nyo mo ge je le sa chu ma thi go re se za wa de ne de le de yong go re se ji an su go re rang chin de le de nyo mo di wa le sa le wa ko wa le nga son ma thi ju go re che za di zu nyo ya cha san zo rang chin de le yong go re se ji.
If I take myself as an illustration, if someone criticizes me for, you've lived here for 6 years and your English is still so poor, to the extent that I feel unhappy by that criticism, this shows to me the rise of my self-cherishing mind. Or if students are not finding my teachings enjoyable or beneficial, to the extent that I take that as personal criticism, that I take this personally. This shows the arisal of grasping at myself as dear. And where we will see it play out very clearly in society and in one's own lives is even where people are very close, dear friends, loved ones, even in the very best of relationships, when the other person doesn't agree with your own view, your own wish to do something or have something, what arises in your mind is an affliction, perhaps even anger, but certainly some degree of aversion towards them. And so often we see dear friends torn apart by disagreement, rather than letting things go, because of the arisal of self-cherishing, of grasping at oneself as dear. From this, our afflictions always follow, attachment and aversion. Recognize the stream. We've spoken about it before, but I'm expanding it here. We've spoken how from the afflictions we accumulate contaminated karma, and we accumulate non-virtuous karma. But the afflictions, come from grasping at oneself as dear.
다 되네기 랑지선 세디다 매와 칸 수고래라나 다 현지선 공고래 세대 현재 봐봐 지산 현재 봐봐 다들 알도 나랑 야고 나랑 빼야고 그랬으면 랑기 돈달라 현리아 지게 강아테 디용으로 봐다 현지선 공고래 현지선 세도 현실 빼야고래 세대 현리아 디기 두고 그래 현리 판 가서 동화세고 현세대 빼마서 개침 현 빼야고래다 선배 현리아 랑다 현이나네 안다 현이 돈달라 랑 가르자 깔려 같이 겹나 겹기 선배게 다 제가 데네자 다니니에 다신 제와 있어 지제 다신 제와 있어 랑 다신 제수다 랑 다신 제비자서야 돼 요마다 삼로들이 랑 지진 다들 안 하주길라 랑 지진 삼로 줘야 지산 랑 지진 삼로 뒤 파도 현일 파제제 현제 버진 다 대신 안 줄이야 랑 제버진에 현 야와 도와 줘와 디 랑 야와도 지자 현제 버진에 랑 야와도 로치 기고레스 지자다 현제 버진에 랑 야와도 쓰도 현이 된다는 할 깔려겠네 자기스가 현이 된다는 할 가요 교고 차나 가면도 현이 판도전에 되기도 현이 하고 전화 되기도 선비다 현제 버진이죠 제가 현이 되기 주야 현이 되기 주나서 현이 동안 세나서 디 된다는 말한기 가르 깔려 가지게나 자기스 어두시네 땅 말한게 경가세라나 경쿠게 세비게 되니지네 현제 좀 공부래스 다디 현지즈 고미아디게 랑치즈는 로도 거래. 제가 랑치즈는 로디 코발에게 녀모지에 규체거래. 현재 받으면 로디기 아니 랑신이가 랑되와 현되와 랑기 안에 삼로디 기회초 권요 공도 편에 아니 장주쌤 규리게다 타바다 탐지 상계고바도 규차도 거래. 제가 현지즈 공부래. 다니네 다셔져와 다쌤 딩네 봐. 오늘랑 랑치즈 삼로 봐 도르제 현재 받지 현이 돈도 라야와도 와sam당 도스니 냠내 제고래 세대다 다시 냠제기 니지 공단도 순고를 때려야
This training presented in the 18th verse starts with recognizing the role that grasping at oneself as dear plays, seeing how it has kept us bound in suffering, and understanding that role. This then leads to the companion part here, which is seeing it as faulty, pervaded by faults, and therefore it's essential to abandon. Then one moves into the second part of the meditation, which is on how to abandon it, on developing the antidotal way of thinking that will reduce and eventually eliminate the grasping at oneself as dear. And that is presented in the third line. From now and from your heart, exchange yourself with others. This is the practice then of equalizing, exchanging self with others. So we have already now recognized that we grasp at oneself as dear, and this serves to keep us distant, apart from others, this feeling of separation that we have with others. This is a mind, it's consciousness. And the way to counteract consciousness is by developing the contrary attitude. And the contrary attitude is one of holding others as supremely dear. So it's taking one attitude and exchanging it for another. To change the attitude of grasping at oneself as dear, exchanging that for holding others as dear. Or to use the common translation, exchanging the self-cherishing mind for the other-cherishing mind. The self-cherishing mind places one's own happiness first and foremost. Even when we do things for others, we take care of ourselves first and foremost. Here, when we exchange yourself for others, it's not exchanging our bodies or something material. It's exchanging one attitude for a second attitude. So rather than holding oneself as supremely dear, we hold others as supremely dear. It's an exchange of attitude. And to develop this attitude, we first have reflected on the faults and the need to abandon the self-cherishing mind, and now wanting to develop the attitude of holding others as dear, we place their need for happiness before our own, first and foremost. And we develop the outlook that from now, my mind, and therefore my physical and verbal activities, will be focused on achieving the welfare of others, helping them overcome problems and suffering, helping them accumulate the causes for lasting happiness. And we need to actually uproot such a deep-seated mind. We need to develop the attitude of holding others as dear in a very powerful manner. We need to develop a strength of mind that sincerely holds, no matter the hardships, I will endure in placing the needs of others first and help them to experience happiness and overcome suffering. This then is how we overcome the self-cherishing mind through developing the other-cherishing mind, exchanging a selfish attitude for a truly wholesome attitude.
Dine zada nga zuki da chö samo kum kure sade de kanglia chö samo kungre sade dinege de dashen nyamche kum kure so da dashen nyamche kum ya de da rangi shengi dondal ya shen digi tuga da shen le pando tugu je zada rang shengi dondal ya rang kale ka se kyapne pa da de rang chiz pa lo je shen je ba chingi shen le ya je gi chuna ya ko du shen le ya pan bo chini shen dewa de shen dungal da shen digi kowi dungal tarba tamji kyo ko top kudu di donda la nge jegi sambegeda di rangi donda de pa lyeje di donda kyanya jegi sebegeda du shine samno di han di gomgu gures da jinyam je gomse di so da di gomgu gure cheringa
In several preceding verses, we were implored to use every possible means to accomplish the profound Dharma, cultivating or engage in the practice of equalizing and exchanging self with others is another technique within those of the profound Dharma. What we're doing here is exchanging the attitude of grasping at oneself as dear, we're exchanging that for holding others as dear. Instead of having ourselves first and foremost in our motivation, we hold the welfare of others first and foremost in our motivation. So throughout this text, we've been developing a variety of motivations to achieve happiness. Here, we place the emphasis on may others achieve happiness. So we can apply this to all the goals we've generated. May others accumulate the causes to ensure a good rebirth. May others turn away from the mundane preoccupations of this life. May others thereby accumulate the causes for good rebirth. May others generate love and compassion in their hearts so as to create the causes for enlightenment in others. May others abide in ethics so as their mind is not overwhelmed by afflictions and thereby create causes for good rebirths. So in this way, all the motivations we have generated, we now generate them for others. And not as a mere aspiration, a mere wish, but accompanying this is the determination, and I will help them achieve this. I will help them develop an ethical outlook. I will help them develop minds of actual love and actual compassion. This is then exchanging self for others, where we place the attainment of lasting happiness of others as our forefront, at the forefront of our motivation. Whereas now, the attainment of our own happiness is at the forefront of our motivation.
랑 야와 도구래 시도양 양 삼노데 가르코르시 그랬으나 오다 랑 젠제바제 양 소소랑 야와 도베네 근데 소소게 빵고 요부 차야다 소소레 내가 말에 전에 생기 된다 그냥 제되네 근데 소소레 튕겨라요 말 소소 강아 책이래서 비게 다 삼노데 아주 용식이로 와대 도과로시.
When one hears this presentation, certainly meditates on it sincerely, the obstacle that arises, the doubt that will arise is, but what about me? If I am focused solely on others, I am going to experience loss. I will experience material loss and loss in other ways because I'll be focusing on others. I'm going to experience more problems and difficulties, and this I really don't want.
데네기다 삼도 연구를 때 이나데 대조 강아체스가요 말에 다 제상하는 저 가르삼 당고르스는 제자다 소수기 칼라스해디 가르치는 세고르스는 하 현리야 로봇체야데 현 디기 주비야데 현이 동화세야 내 제발은 하 수부야고 고려 와서 제가 수부 타나 면능에 현 가는 로봇체도 그 현이 강아 가는 세투래 대상의 현리 로봇체야당 현기 강아세야 돈달 내가 제를 가 수부 타다고 디 돈달이야 내 칼라디게서 위에서 비게 소수기 데니게 저 삼단의 소수기 칼라세야당 수부를 최된지에 되게 찾아 누섬다베네 소수 수부 최된나 칼라 리고르데 디 랑이 이제 나 넘진 가서서 나 수부야고 고도 나 당부 고도 나 대기 고도 삼로 여러와 어디 삼로 봐 도르체네 다 현리 대기 주고도 현이 강아 세고도 디스 강이 네 강아 세발 나 수부 당부 고도 나 안에 강아 직기 수부 당보다 안에 전에 야고 맞으네 네 현이 가는 로봇이 두래 디인자 현이 로봇이야 돼 현이 동아세 현이 대기 주비야 된다라 말하는 수부기 튕긴치도 안에 칼라데 이제 최대제 디지규에 선배게 안도도시네 삼단에 현유의 삼다샤오래 안디네 아주 내가 레고하다 내가 소수기 튕긴주에 되네 당연히 나랑을 튕긴 매바 강아 자야동에 매바다 튕긴 변조 강하면 강아 채소는 나가 시간에 잘 로봇간 시투그래 그래서 당연히 잘 로봇 제발랑 나를 강아 마태바 근데 야고지 고도와 진짜 네 내가 해야지 현스 디기 주비하다 신이 동화세야야 아니 야고 나랑 튕긴디 된다도 두기 선비기 소소 내가 해야로 치다 소소 칼라사야다 소소 캠경조야 링가다 진짜 현기 된다 삼다지도 제베나 차사 삼로디 샨든 치고 차고르데 이내 소소 된다디 주부거다 용어라고 된다 주부거래 세상디 된다 주디가 삼로 샨된다 안에 된다 소소를 최대요 소소 튕기엔 주두고 봐대 차고래 세상디게 개화를 차르고 와 아니 아주 칼라 하마로 치유베네 여베네 다 칼라 하마 넘닝 아주 가서 어다디 닝바샤서 판도면서 유샤고 선배 삼단 거로 어디 삼마다 이제 칼라 하마 지구는 닝바 판마도 지나 어다 유디 셈젠 무슨 망고를 컨트 디바샤 컨트롤이야 칼라 해야 된다 제시긴 선배기 두셔베나 디 군노디 개회사바기 샹기 치도 샹되게 삼바장 예래대로 두스 제베네 다 먼저 이게 다신 냠제 샹제와 진배 삼로세디 두스 제네 장고고래 생각을 놓어야
When a doubt such as this and others arise, this is to be welcomed because through the arisal of doubts, they can be eliminated. When one thinks about things deeply and sincerely, doubts should arise. So here the thought is, for example, if now everything I do is supposed to be focused on the happiness of others, surely all the food I have, I should give to others. All the money I have, I should give to others. Every possession I have, I should give to others. So what about me? So this is a good doubt to have, because if that doubt because by having the doubt one can dispel it. Without dispelling it, one will hold back from the practice, not understanding it, seeing it as extreme, and therefore not engage in it. So here to overcome the doubt, we reflect that the purpose of Buddhism is to develop our wisdom. So we utilize wisdom here, taking the example of giving away all my food. Whilst I need to give food to others who are in need, to be able to help others in a sustained manner throughout this life, this body needs to be healthy. Therefore, I also need to eat sufficient, nutritious food. I also need to spend time exercising and looking after this body. Also, I need to ensure I wear suitable clothing so that this body is cared for, because on the basis of a healthy body, I can engage in far more virtuous activities than if I'm impeded by ill health. And so as to be able to afford suitable clothing, as well as to live in a suitable home that protects me from the environment, I need to go to work. I need to have a career so that I can have the money that is required in society so that I can look after myself and thereby be of help to others. And likewise with material possessions. There is a level of comfort that I require. And for this, I need to have an income. Without these things, I could not help others. So therefore, I do need possessions. I do need a home, and so forth. So this then gives us a more balanced perspective. And just like before, when we were looking at abandoning the concerns of this life, the preoccupation with this life, doesn't necessarily mean abandoning going to work or eating food. It's about changing our mind. So too here. Moreover, when one is thinking focused on others, one will do some things that one has always done before and continue to do so, but do them differently. And there will be new things that one will do that one did not do differently, doing them both now, both groups, with the motivation of benefiting others. So for example, when there's leftover food, perhaps before one threw it away, or maybe one gave it to one's pets, but just as a way of clearing the plate. Here, with another cherishing mind, one will have eaten one's full of nutritious food. Now there's an abundance, one will share it with others, so as to alleviate their suffering. And in this way, with this motivation, one does not throw the food away, but gives it to the pet, or to some insects. And one does so with a remarkable motivation. And thereby, the mere act of giving food is now not just clearing a plate, but it serves to ease the suffering of a being, and thereby may I create merit so as to ease the suffering of all beings. This is how we create vast stores of merit through primarily changing our mind, and sometimes not even our activities.
Dine samma tangje kala seduine soso subuna le pusinda paatu me bachiore jesa desolya kala sane konsu chene ane subuna ge pusindike ane luidia de semki wa shu di yongwa sho sembe samda jeng zo kala sabeina ane dia dimba jime nyamle je shanle pembe sembe kunne laje kala sagorwa jesa di gewa chago jesa rang 안 넘니 가라서 랑 디버야 랑 기부야 야랑 소소한 신부야에 삼다 세고로와 지선 디파랑 삼선스 파샤제 근데 디 된다려야 디나랑이 수분을 부신 빠도 매버져 디솔야네 칼라이야 선비 콘조카디 칼라사체는 콘조 수부 되어야다 셈 기부야에게 데니쇼쇼 선비게 데니게 삼다제 사베네 Dine kala sagyo de rang shen jeba zimbe samtone sagore. Di sadyo susul subule ni pingore. Di gewade sagore. Dine samdang gore songorwa.
And a further change in attitude that can help create vast stores of merit is right now when we eat, our focus is primarily on, I hope this is delicious, and whilst tasting it, oh, it is, or unfortunately it's not. Our own happiness. Be aware that in our body, we have a vast store of bacteria. Whether these have consciousness or not is a little hard to tell, but we know they feast off what enters into our stomach and our gut. So we can imagine that they do have consciousness, whether they do or not, we imagine so, that we are offering to them. So this meal is for my good health, my momentary pleasure, but also directly benefit comes to others.
Jeba Zimbike, some of the Rang Yawa, the Shen Jeba Zimbe, Shen Dusin, some Janya Dadibene, Zada, Sosugi, Dondadi, Donda Nimbu Drup to water, that Shen Samba, Shen Du Samje, Donda Randun Drup to Randun Pusun Soba Drup to water. And Rang Dewa, Shen Dewa, Rashin Nigalia, Diki Drup to water. Benanga the Tonchu by Yarmjes, Dusine, Jike, Chiktaven, Yarmjane, Chikidina, Shenlia. Jambadan Zevi Yamlin, Sosora, Jamze, Janshu Simbi Yamlina, and Shanley, and Jamse Yamlin, or Dusukumachedu. Yarmjelia and Chiki Mi Gaze Galene Chechung, Karina Stamlina, Gazeka Chasangi, Yarmstelia Chiga, Kurag, Kohopse, Jam Chige, Chishuada, Chik Chasang, Yarmjelia, and Chike Gobucheda, Chitingura, Digarson, Shen Jabba Simbi, some of the Digi Delet in Ungurua. 나가서 통째서 기고 bombo 카실에 배랑 제진 배랑기 마도 매 삼디게 되지길래 민망부게 견주셔야 돼 미쳐서 생다를 못 쳐야 돼 진짜 랑 제진의 현 제진 이디기 랑 제바 배가나 야고 고고도 선배 제진 디기 라라 누구마다 팽임도 와 소소야 로체게 로보 머신버 뉴아차 소소라 마카게 망아차다 다딩아주 통치수 기버와 다시 여름저로지 다티시 현재바즈네 현래 디규주와다 현재하고 존나 선배게 두치네 현재바즈 곰지 곰냠네 지지도 아니 델리아 로보 망아 머신버 망아 거부지게 망아 아니 연구가 받은 아주게 세부를 제가 통치수 기버에 레더와 제가 되는 현상 다디딩 아주 디나는 랍제디기 차상 디순고르지다 랑치진 세아디 파 돌고 디삼로도 노트리에스 아주 동아야다 라신이가 강아테에게 규디 데네티 용걸 디파 돌고레스 다 현재버스면 삼로된 아주 양도 서 곰제 누바처럼 담고레스 디기 라신이가 디기 주비에게 디에 차고레 제상 아주 소소라라 상지고 뭐 토비 규디에 데리든 네트고레스 다 도나 디순고레
The second key point to make here in overcoming the doubt of what about me if I focus solely on others is that to the extent that one develops a genuine attitude, altruistic attitude focused on the welfare of others first and foremost, oneself will receive great benefit. While due to this focus on the welfare of others, clearly, due to our mental development and our expression of this physically and verbally, we bring benefit to others. This is clear. But through doing that, we create vast stores of merit, which brings great happiness to our mind, clears obstacles, enables our spiritual development and our progression towards liberation and enlightenment. So in this way, our own benefit is achieved at the same time. So the benefit is for self and others. Where we can see a living example of this is His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He lives guided by love, compassion and bodhicitta with an attitude focused solely on others. And we see that he meets people from all walks of life people who otherwise would have no interest in meeting a spiritual leader. And we see from video or photographs the great joy in their minds at being in his presence. And we can compare this to video and photos of people when they meet other famous people, whether political leaders or others, who have great fame, great power, but are clearly self-centered. You can see the energy of the group is very different. So here, whether he says or does anything, due to the power of the love and compassion in his mind, others benefit. With a large audience before him, they all benefit to the qualities of his mind, placing others first and foremost. And from his side, and beings like him, there's never a shortage of wholesome friends and people wanting to help and assist. And one's own emotional needs are never unfulfilled, and there's not ever a feeling of being alone, whether in the company of others or not. And this all comes from what, prior to investigation, seems like a paradox of placing others first and foremost. So this then is essential to reflect on, to give us the strength of mind to continue to strive to transform what we prioritize and value.
dine zada shen jebar zimbe shen li digi chua da shen yi dunga se shen jebar chine dine shen gi dunga sanje sala ko kudu de zang semja tamche de sanje ko ba tobar chigi yin se be ne janju sem damba jebar cha se janju sem gong go re sa sung go re.
The verse concludes, I implore you to generate the sacred mind of enlightenment. So this then, we are being encouraged, having generated or meditated on equalizing, exchanging self for others, to then generate bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, which is the determination to work for the welfare of others, so that's been generated, through becoming the most skilled of guides, a Buddha, so that we can lead them to create the causes for happiness and eliminate the causes that will otherwise lead to suffering. So therefore we take the meditation further and generate bodhicitta.
Adine chödamje dine tabichir rango druba machi par du gyundo kumbe tinzingi da korwe zawa jeba chas.
19th verse. Because all phenomena are dependent on labeling by mind, they do not exist by way of their own essence. By repeatedly meditating with meditative stabilization, please cut the root of samsara now.
당한주 동아야기 가ring으로서는 되샤 공로왕 하자 마리바 현실에 체외 삼바 디솔레테네 안한주기 량한바 사제데니 코르왈이 깨지 동아용고레세 동아규디 디 라트체르와 다데 안 데조 간슬리고레 시드 디안 데니기 되샤 공로왕 하자 마리바 디소야 안 규데기 메발라티니 중고마데 규단께레티니 규가르레라도 denze marikpa ase de iligore ase denze marikpa ase da gu nyomba kesegi denze marikpa ase deji rang jisen se de rang jisen se de rang demba tube be denze de ayor dinale di chigun gore chesa de denege rang demba tube na wa na shin delya chepa de zimbi ki zimba de dele den iligore chesa dene insa ndima pango gore ase worta.
We've seen the sequence. The suffering that we experience and long to be freed from is a result that comes about in dependence on the ripening of karma. That karma is a result that has come about due to being accumulated by the afflictions. The afflictions have as their very root the ignorance of self-grasping. So in the previous verse, we mentioned that the afflictions come from grasping at the self as dear. Grasping at the self as dear is grasping at oneself as existing by way of its own nature, as existing truly. Therefore, we see the relationship between grasping at the self as dear, as a truly existent self as dear, and the root of all suffering, the ignorance of self-grasping, the ignorance of grasping at the self as being truly existent or existing by way of its own nature. This being the root of suffering then, this ignorance, is what we must abandon. And how does one abandon ignorance? Through developing the contrary mind of wisdom, in particular the wisdom realizing emptiness.
Kala madio korong wene drup de ba korong wene yede ba shenjele suchile madio korong wene yoba rubshi nga nengore di na nangsu di na di kala ma rang wene druba di temba druba se gore di yomare di temba druba se yene dine chile temba druba la gore sesan kala ma rang wene druba kala ma rang wene yede ba di nanzu dine takara dine du sembe lola shawana shi dine du sembe zimba di densin se gore 제사다 나 강라이마 랑 원에 주베 짐베 덴시리 제사디 덴시 디베바 방고 디로 록셰레 디로 노트리스 콜로 록셰에서 노트이상 코이 제수 주비 되자 콘동하게 차상 노트샤게 차디오레 제사 디 제수 저나 간서 노트게 강가디 되래 제사 디 방고 그래서 그래
Ignorant of self-grasping, which can also be called the ignorance of true grasping, is the root of all our suffering. So therefore, it's essential to understand this. Before we understand the ignorance, we need to understand what is grasped at, what this means. So to understand the term true existence, take, for example, our self. How does our sense of self-identity appear to us? The way that appears is as if it is self-existent. It exists by way, which means it exists by way of its own essence or nature or defining characteristics. There is some essence to our self by which it exists, what has its own defining nature by which it exists. This is how the self appears to us. To use other language, to try and make it a bit clearer, it appears to be independent, which means not impacted by anything else, because it exists by way of its own nature. It cannot be impacted by anything else, because it already is self-existent. So therefore it appears to be unconnected to anything, fixed and static and unchanging. So this is how the self appears. We call this true existence, in that the way that it appears is seen to be how it exists, when in fact it does not exist in this way. The self and no other phenomenon exists in this way. Nothing exists truly or by way of its own nature or essence. So this is how the self, for example, appears. Then a consciousness grasps at the self as existing in the way that it appears. Because the self does not exist truly, this consciousness that grasps at it as existing truly, as existing the way that it appears, is not in accordance with reality, and therefore is an ignorance. The ignorance of self-grasping. Grasping at the self as being truly existent. Hence, ignorance of self-grasping, ignorance of true grasping. Not being in accordance with reality, it's a wrong consciousness. Being a wrong consciousness, it afflicts our mind and leads to all the other afflictions arising. Hence, it's the root cause of all our suffering.
Denigi, I say, can't lie about rang when you do, now I did, rang when you do the body, and the temper to pass, the Jures a bit in this. That na se can't lie about rang when you do body, Yomare, 제상 강라이마 랑원이 마주비게 동바 강라드네 랑원이 마주보 거롱 동바 인식거다 제자다 만주게 나세 우이니 수디 간시어서 강라이 마주바 랑원이 마주바디제 되어래 제상한 우이니 수 통고 마통와제 노주 진주거래 제상한 가르 통고를 쓴다 강라이 마들 거롱 오디 강라이 마들 랑원이 주비게 동바시 동상차 되어래 제상 디하고 거래스 제단 디하고는 강라이마 랑운의 주비게 동바디 동사디 동니세들이에요. 디도고 그래서 디하고도 나 그런게 무인니스 통고래. 무인니스 전에 대신 노트짐에 삼로 도르고 그래서 제단 디 강라이마도 랑운의 마주바디 동반이세 디도고 그래서 그렇다. 디도별로도 콤팔할 때는 안주게는 랑운의 주바짐비 짐바디 도르고 그래. 랑운의 주비 짐바디 도서는 자와 매바자 제가 대샤 공정하자 녀모 버기 말했어. 디마게는 랭아 바사게 말이네. 코알게 해요 말했어. 진짜 타르바세 두고래 해야지 또 숨고래.
All phenomena appear to exist by way of their own essence. And this is what is meant by the term true existence or inherently existent or existent by way of its own essence. They appear as if they exist by way of their own essence, whereas no phenomenon exists in this way. Then a consciousness grasps at it as existing in the way that it appears. This grasping consciousness is not in accordance with reality, therefore it's an ignorance. The way phenomena, for example the self, actually exist in reality is being empty of being established by way of their own essence. The way they appear to us is as being existing by way of their own essence, but in reality they are empty of existing by way of their own essence. This is how phenomena such as the self exist in reality. So just like in every aspect of our life, where we lack knowledge on a situation, we therefore have a degree of confusion, and therefore we are much more likely to make an error. Where we have good knowledge about a situation, we are much more likely to make a right decision. So similarly here, the consciousness is that of ignorance. It's a not knowing. It is therefore not being in accordance with reality. Problems, faults will follow. And this is the process of ignorance leading to the afflictions and suffering. When we eliminate ignorance, completely eradicate it, the root cause of suffering then is gone. If the root cause is gone, no result can follow. No affliction will follow. Therefore, no contaminated karma can ripen. Therefore, no suffering is experienced. When the root cause, the foundation of the sequence is removed, everything falls apart. And in this way, freedom from suffering is achieved by the eradication, the complete eradication of this ignorance.
Dine inza ta chue kandishina kangla ye ma tyo ba rang ngwan yu tube me ba res cheta rang ngwan yu tube su yo ma res gyumje garasine chue temji dine da pe chi res chue kandishina shen shi le due ne pa lue da ni yo ba res dine da pe chi ane rang ngwan yu tube ma chi ba se kangla ma tyo ba rang ngwan yu tube su yo ma res me be gyumje garasine cha shen shi le due ne pa lue da ba zu yo ba res chi.
Phenomena appear to exist by way of their own essence, whereas in reality they are empty of existing by way of their own essence. But phenomena do exist conventionally, and how so? As dependent arisings. Dependent arising we can understand in many ways. The most common way to understand it is dependent on causes. And that can be expressed as interdependence. From causes, things arise. There's an interconnected relationship between phenomena.
Dini za da nga zu ge dini ge dong ba yi de duo jie duo ne dini ge dong ba yi le de le ya an zhe ji de nian ba xie bei ge ding ge zi zhu jie xi la song zhe zhu dini ko wei za wa da sen de bang tu ge yes ne ko wa le zhe ta ba se tu go le ji le du gun de gu bei ding zhen ji da ko wei za wa jie ba cha le se.
Returning to verse 19, so we looked at the first two lines. Because all phenomena are dependent on labeling by mind, so that's how they do exist. This is another class of dependent arising. They do not exist by way of their own essence. They are empty of existing by way of their own essence. Now the last two lines, by repeatedly meditating with meditative stabilization. This then refers to the union of calm abiding and meditative insight. By repeatedly meditating with such a powerful mind on emptiness and dependent arising, please cut the root of samsara now.
nisum jada lojinala toba yung tegri jere jazanda dinenza dakishi barde nanshinti tapkebe jebi kusumdu sejila gyuwe nyuba ye lamdira nyeba dare delen zamse jazanda sanje goba nyomoba deji nyomoba de nyomoba ba kurweza desin payati 저게 체딜아야 방투야기 누워요래 생각하는 소리야. 데니기 방투이 탑람이요래스. 제산자 자오스 자기시 바드스 레다 녀모 라와미베 치에기 끼와다 치와다. 데서 안에 제 바도 주야 디차사 탑케비게 람 냠는 구숨 얘네 람 냠는 제발에 데네 체딜아 저 상유고방 톱티비기 가서 누워요래. 제산 데니기 데니 디르위 Nuba yoba telia lamde nyamne chele, diring nyamne chele, kohapravade nyamne che ore ese orada. Ta donda sichigiti donda dirida.
The 20th verse. Your clinging to ordinary conceptions of foes, birth, death, and the bardo can be transformed in a single lifetime through skillful means into the three bodies of a Buddha. This may be your only chance to develop a path such as this. This verse then addresses when complete freedom and perfection can be attained, when one can become a Buddha for the sake of others. It can be done over many lifetimes, eons of time. But through applying oneself with skillful means, it can be done in this very life. The essential component is developing the union of bodhicitta and the wisdom directly realizing emptiness. And through this union, one can destroy our foes or enemies of birth, death, and the bardo, or in English, the intermediate state. These can be transformed in a single lifetime through training with skillful means. So this verse recognizes our capacity to radically transform our mind in a way that is so hidden from us now that it seems inconceivable. But we can arise as Buddhas in a single lifetime. The final verse. When covered with hair white like snow, wrinkles like waves and unsteady, having trained like this in the Dharma each day, your mind will be relaxed and at ease, as if in the full bloom of youth.
이내 당하죠 수북근고 차주고르데 이내 가서 셈나려야 대시셰바나신 당보 잠바다 잠바콤 되네 제와 이제 좀 랑 삼로 도와시 신 제바 집에 삼다 되네 잠제다 이제콤 되네 장슈 셈콤 되네 짐바 추림다 쇠바다 짐바도 추림 쇠바 전주기 안에 삼된 셰럽다 동방이 세다 대지기 냠는 제발라 되네 두시드 냠는 제도 님의 직제 님의 이제 니데 시도 최디신 제나 니데 신스 님의 레레레레야 맞아 셈지 직 님의 직제 이제 두시드 니베야 셔셔셔 조데 되는 셈 대외 랑소스 셈디 Manzul was a boon mass on the Shen, Shen, Yara, just not the niche and SMD, but nobody come with the George Gure, then Gabber Curishness and Yakoba to 2 years, said that, Tamega, the Neza, Manzulia, so in the two word in Adam, Anzus, Yamden Jedit, in Mutu Chakures, do Jabana San Yakoba top 2 years, said that. Dus Jehures Mada, Muchiki, Anzulia, Lapshatus Nangorwada.
The text concludes with Gendün Gyatso saying, training in the way that I have presented here, not sporadically, but building on the inspiration that has arisen, and training like this for an extensive period, your body will age. Whatever age you are now, you will see, and others will perceive, the physical decline. However, through training like this, your mind becoming entwined with the Dharma, in particular love, compassion, and the wisdom realizing emptiness, whilst the vessel will become aged and decrepit, the mind will be ageless, being likened here to having the vitality of youth. So through transforming the mind, through repeated training of an extensive period, it's likened to attaining an ageless state.
Tu dewa chenpe porane ku chenpe ranche longche son le she tu se chabe pa paketin chenje shabla tu se dan zo din ma dirin da ti tup chaware tinga di pe ko ni ma dyen be yin ko ni ma dyen be yin che de Sarva dirva den ji tu
That then brings us to the conclusion of the text. So I'm reciting for auspiciousness the first verse again. Om, may bliss and happiness prevail from a mind that is a palace of great happiness, a body with natural marks and signs, a perfected resource, speech of eloquent teachings raining down like nectar. My benevolent Father, I prostrate at your feet.
Di maombana mutije pa chenje ki tendige chidu ko tsish twenje da den ma she la yus maombana she ko hob tendige ko raya tondala tu sugo logore.
The purpose of this custom is so as to create the auspicious connection that because you've now heard the first verse, to have the opportunity again to hear the whole text taught.
Da diring anzo da chaware tene za da chawe ningbode da di shue dire anzo ge jige jamni se samta an jige rangche se samshen che wa jibe samta da ne jige jamba da ni je komya ane jige churim soya ne ko jig jimbe dongwe semba chaya do shene ne jajo semja dem sanyo ko ba tobar sho se be jajo sem komya di rimba di khasang ke ne ga yane yando shu bare de sang ga zo da di di ne kha zo ko gap du se ka se na di pa yane ya du ko kora jep do shene sam ga se dang tu da di ye chen bore di ring ga zo di chen ji be ning bo ro sta ge di na so so ke jo ya di re da
The gift that one receives, has received with this text, the gift that one takes away, is the understanding of what meditation is, the need to repeatedly reflect on the Dharma, both in session and keep recalling it throughout the day, reminding oneself of the preciousness of this life and all that it can achieve, but how the situation is impermanent, as are all the things that we encounter and value, reflecting on the suffering nature of samsara, and conjoining that with bodhicitta, understanding that all beings are the same as us, longing for happiness, and developing the minds of love and compassion into that of bodhicitta, and holding all of this with the wisdom realizing emptiness, cultivating the mind of mind of wisdom. So the encouragement, because you all have lives with a lot of activity and not so much free time. As much as you can, as frequently as you can, engage in these meditations. And to the extent, particularly in terms of frequency, change will come.
And the digital currency college me on it and yam chick Gawatu to your Dejan Yamlin Chiavadi, Anzugida, Tarbata Tamchi Kimbi Govan Toyagi, like the Sumbanajin, the Gawa Church, Jagor, Sumbanajin Council Church Javare, and the Geshe, Gawaya Wasayore, Tarbata Tamchi Kimbi Govan Toy, Gusadere, Jazada, Manzumi Matoma, the Toy, Sujubuch in the Council, Javrola K. Mutoyagi, Bottomebachi Dure, Jazan Dineza, Council, Manzu Dination and the Chick. Denigis Jer Gobiaborason, Sambigi, Gahogomia, Diana, Yado, Mombana, the Kususkidina, Yamadinichera, Gawacom, and Momba there, Deniki Gang to Chigin, Sambigi, Dumba, Denishadi, and the Geshe.
All of you gave up a very valuable resource to come here, free time. And you've heard these teachings. You've listened attentively, reflected well in the meditation sessions, and thereby you've accumulated vast stores of virtue. And this virtue is directed towards the attainment of liberation and enlightenment for yourselves, for the benefit of others. If this virtue, this vast store of virtue that we each have accumulated were to take form, it would be far, far too heavy for us to carry from here. But it will accompany us throughout this life and into our future lives. So I encourage you here to recognize the causes that you have created to come here, and that you came here and endured hardships, perhaps with the cold in the early mornings, and generate joy at what you have done. And generate with this joy the aspiration to continue these meditations in your daily life, integrating them in your daily life, and continue again in the future to receive teachings and thereby add to your knowledge and skill, and thereby skill in meditation.
Anzuki Gawas that Jimmy Kashiri Langar Chasangi Duchin, Gawasa, Yobade, Gawadilla, and Zemni Chasalia, and the Chikshidi, Nemu, Ginem de Gipashin, and Mautuda, Niem de Shine, and Zemni Chasali, Michasala, Digita, Shidi, or Show, said that, more carry.
Before we come to dedicate, I'll mention several key points for you to hold in mind whilst reciting the dedication verses. Firstly, this vast store of merit that we've accumulated, may it bring an end to all suffering in the world, thinking particularly of violence and conflict, as well as the suffering from illness.
Atisha Sendegi Chosoki, Deniki, Twinkin, Derije, and the Samdia Derije, Ducene, J, and the and several like to Chikum Trichena, Ducene, and John the Young, Ducene, and the Denizada, Narani Lipa, Sheagi, Shene, Gawasadi, Yaposaya Rayore, this Shaza, and me. The Genzenda and Chicken Sevicoti Javada, Kuranzuki, the Yonche, some debigi, Desolatine, Manilia, Kawaya, Wasaya, Rayore, Chazadinesa, Kurchasala to Chesue.
Now I'm going to express my own personal thanks, but whilst expressing it, I encourage you to express it in the same way, because we have this interdependent relationship, and therefore the virtue that I and each of us have accumulated has come about independent on many causes, in particular each other. So first of all, I want to thank all of you for coming, because by you coming, you gave me the opportunity to once again read this text and reflect on its meaning and think about how I can present it, and then to present it. And I've done so as best as I can in our time, and with as pure motivation as I can generate. And by this, I know I've accumulated a vast store of merit, so thank you to all of you. And then moreover, one needs to really mention the staff of Atisha Center, both the full-time staff and the voluntary staff, who have made this event possible. In particular, in the forefront, Venerable, who I have great confidence in her, and therefore know that the meditation she would have led would have been of great benefit for you. So thank you to her as well, because she would have accumulated vast stores of merit, and independence on her kindness and energy over many years has brought great benefit to everyone here. And so too, I won't mention all the staff and volunteers here, but we can think of the director and the SPC and all others who, due to their endeavors, both here and the causes they created so as to be able to help here, we have been able to enjoy this time together. Thank you very much, and we'll finish there. Thank you.